Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are joining me for the first time today. My name is Lucy and today I did an updated makeup tips and tricks video for beginners or just for anyone who cares for a little bit more advice. So if you are interested in seeing some of my advice and my favourite tips and tricks for blending, cutting the crease and winged liner, then please do keep watching. Hey everyone, so I just want to do a really quick disclaimer at the beginning of this video. If you are someone who doesn't like to hear me talk much, or you don't want to hear me talking for the whole video straight, then please do click off, because going through each step and giving you my tips and tricks is going to be a lot of talking, and I know a lot of you guys get frustrated when I talk a lot in my videos, so I'm just putting it out there. If you don't want to hear me talk a lot, then you don't have to watch it. Anyways, so my first tip for makeup in general, especially for eyeshadow, is I love to have a really good base down for my eyeshadow. You guys know this, I am very big on my eyeshadow bases. I did do a previous video comparing the Anastasia Beverly Hills eye primer with the P. Louise base, literally in my last video probably, so if you haven't seen that yet then do go and watch that. But anyways, for the purpose of today's video, I've literally got the eye primer in front of me by Anastasia Beverly Hills, so that is the one I'm going to use. This one is just the original shade that they've brought out. So I only take a small dollop of that eye primer and that will probably be enough for me to go across both my lids. Another thing to mention before I forget is that I don't set my eye primer down. I literally put it on, and this one in particular mattifies a little bit anyway, so you don't really feel the need to set it in place with translucent powder or a nude eyeshadow or anything like that. I leave it unset. I'm just going to take this on the Anastasia Beverly Hills A16 brush and pat that into both my lids. Okay, so my eye primer is now on. I'm just going to throw it out there that I don't feel like the way you pat in the eye primer really makes much of a difference. I used to swear by using a brush because I always thought that a beauty sponge soaked it up, but to be honest with you, nowadays I either use my finger, I'll use a brush, I'll use a sponge. It really does depend on how I'm feeling in the day. So obviously today I used a brush, but it always switches up. For my eyeshadow today, I'm going to go ahead and use the Sosu by Suzanne Jackson Urban Bible palette in collaboration with Kaylee MUA. This is such a pretty palette. I just love all of the colours in it so much. It's got a really gorgeous colour story. Now, in my previous blending tips and tricks video, I did also do a sunset coloured eye look. I am going to do the same again today because I do still feel like that is the easiest colour scheme to show the transition between the colours from a deeper red to an orange to a yellow and so on. So I am going to do the same again today. Also, I do want to compare how it looked before to how it's going to look if I do it now. So that's what I'm going to do. So one of the main points when it comes to blending is that I say you really must have some small blending brushes. This is a personal choice, but for me, I found it works really well to show the transition between the colours. I find that the bigger the brush, the more it just looks a little bit muddy and all of the colours merge into one. Whereas when you've got a smaller brush, you can really show the definition between the colours and just basically make them pop more. Another thing I like to do is, if you've ever seen my videos before, I'm sure you would know this by now, but I always start with the darkest colour through the crease first and work my way up to the lightest colour on top. So the first shade I'm taking from this gorgeous palette is the shade Unruly. This is a deep dark red sort of burgundy shade, and I'm just going to pack that on with a Morphe brush. This brush is out of the Grand Masters brush collection from Morphe, so it doesn't have a particular name, but this is a really great brush. So I'm going to start in the middle of my eye where my crease is, and I'm just going to start to pat that into shape. I find that patting the colour down really makes it opaque rather than swiping it, so I like to pack it on to make sure I've got the fullest opacity possible. I'm also making sure to just slightly buff out those edges as I go, so I'm going in little circular motions just at the top of that blend to make sure that it's slightly diffused before we go in with the next colour. Now that the first shade is down, I'm going to go in with my next colour, which I think I'm going to actually take the orange shade, which is called Majesty. Some of you guys might go for the red and then the orange, but for the sake of my eyes, I don't know if I'd have enough room to do the red, orange and the yellow, so I'm just going to jump right to the orange. So I'm just picking up a small bit of that colour and we're just going to go right on top of the dark burgundy shade. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I am also holding the brush right at the back rather than nearer to the front, as though I was, you know, writing with a pencil or something. something. I like to hold it nearer to the back, and I also never put my little finger on the brush as well, which sounds really strange, but I find that it really helps to apply less pressure to the brush and therefore gives off a smoother and more easier looking blend. This is a tip I've been doing for literally the entire time I've been doing makeup pretty much. I always hold it near the back, and I go in from a lower angle, especially because I find that it blends together the bottom shade with the next shade you're putting on top. So never go in like this because it's going to give you a harsh line, but if you go in from a lower angle, then it will blend the two together. Now we've got the basic orange shade down. You can see that I've still got a little bit of a harsh line. That's not going to go away until we put the yellow on top. However, you can help to prevent that by just using the same brush, not picking up any added colour, but just slightly buffing over those edges. You don't want to take it too high, otherwise there'll be no room for the next colour, but just slightly going back and forth over the edge. So the next shade I'm going in with is the shade Faith, which is obviously the gorgeous yellow shade in the palette. Yellow is my favourite colour, so this is my favourite step of the blend. I'm picking that up on another one of the Morphe Grandmasters brushes. They've also got a very similar brush to this, which is the E18 brush, I believe, which I really love to use for yellow. So I'm taking this brush, again, going from a lower angle, and I'm going to apply the yellow above the orange. I also want to mention that you can do this with any colour story. You don't have to do it with Sunset colours. Like I said at the beginning, I'm only using these colours because I do find that for me personally, they show the nicest blend through the colours, so that's why I'm using them for the video. Yo. Okay, so I've just been off camera and I decided to go back through that blend and just re-intensify the colours. I also took the darker shade at the bottom up slightly higher because when I come to cutting the crease, it was going to get lost. So I decided to take it up slightly higher into the blend. One final thing I like to do when I'm blending is that I like to take a white eyeshadow on a small blending brush. This one is the by Kira B brush. So I'm going to go in with the shade Veil, which is the white shade in the Urban Bible palette. Tap it off a little bit, and I like to use the white just to diffuse the very edge of that blend. So where my eyebrow is up here, I'm just going to take it slightly in there to diffuse the yellow. Now I feel like a lot of you are going to think it's such a weird trick, but if you think about it in terms of paint, when you mix a shade with a white, then obviously it makes a lighter colour. So I feel like with the edges of the blend, when you mix white with them, it just makes a lighter colour and really just helps to diffuse it out and make it look a lot more put together. This has been a really great trick of mine that I've been doing for a little while now, and I find it just works so well with every single colour, every single blend. I just recommend you all to try it if you haven't already. Okay, so on to the next topic, which is cutting the crease. If you've ever watched any of my videos before, I'm sure you'd probably already know this trick by now, but what I love to do when I cut the crease is I always take some makeup remover and a cotton bud or a Q-tip and just remove that shadow from underneath first before I go ahead and cut the crease on top. Now the reason I like to do this is mainly because I don't like it when you cut the crease and then obviously the concealer mixes with the shade of the eyeshadow and it goes a weird muddy shade. So I like to just get rid of it first so I have a nice clean colour. The other reason is because when I do go and cut the crease with more concealer, I don't want it to cake on top of the base I've already got down. So I just like to get rid of it and start fresh basically with the cut crease. So that's what I'm going to do first. It also acts as a really nice guide for when you do go to cut the crease with the concealer. You kind of know the shape you're going. However, with this step, you don't want to take it too high up because you obviously can't put it back on once you've taken it off. So I recommend to do this step slightly lower, and then if you want to cut your crease higher, then you can do. Whilst I'm at this point, you can also see that I am starting to lose that darker shade again. So whilst we've got no concealer on, I'm just going to go back in with the slightest bit of Unruly, which is the shade we started with, and just pack that on top of the blend. The darker shade in the blend is really important for doing a cut crease because when you come to cut the crease, you want to make sure you can see the dark colour for definition. Okay, so actually cutting the crease, what I like to use is the P. Louise base in the shade 0. I like to use this one because it is a white base, and because when I like to cut the crease, I like to have a white base. Okay, so the main piece of information I can give you, or advice I can give you for cutting the crease, is to use a large concealer brush to cut the crease. A lot of people will go ahead and cut the crease using a small concealer brush, and to be honest with you, it is personal preference. But for me, if I'm giving you advice, I would say go for a large concealer brush, because this has honestly changed my world. The brush I usually use to cut my crease is the Zoeva 144 large concealer brush. However, I don't actually know where it is at the moment, so I'm gonna go for my second favorite concealer brush, which is the Anastasia Beverly Hills A4 brush. You can see it is really big and it's got a very large and flat brush head. It does sound a little bit grotty, but I also like to make sure it has got some product on it before, so I can really squeeze it together and make sure it's as flat as possible. When it is freshly washed, it is a little bit larger and harder to work with, but when it has got a little bit of product on it, it is a lot easier to get a sharp, crisp line. Okay, now this step is really difficult to say for everyone's eye shape, but for me personally, what I like to do is take a little bit of the P. Louise base onto my brush, and the first thing I like to do to map out the shape is to look straight ahead in my mirror and make a dot just above my natural crease and to the edge and on the inner corner as well. If you do have more hooded eyes than me, a lot of people like to do the stamping onto the lid and then looking up, and that's where you'll get your cut crease line. However, I don't like to do that because it takes it too high for my liking. So what I'm gonna do is just take a little bit more of that product now and start to work that cut crease. I like to stamp the product into place first, just joining up those dot to dots, and then I'll go back over and make sure the line looks nice and smooth. Another piece of advice I can give you when cutting the crease is you don't want to lean back or squint your eyes or raise your eyebrows too much when you're doing this, because it can look a really great shape whilst you're doing that, but as soon as you let your eyes relax, it's going to look completely different and it's not going to work with your eye shape. So you want to make sure you are relaxing when you're doing it as well, because if you're constantly like this or pulling on your brow or anything like that, it's going to give you a false shape. So you want to make sure that you are relaxing your eyes as much as you can. Okay, now my crease is cut into place. You can see it has slightly got a pink tinge to the colour. That is only because we have gone on top of the red shade and the white has just mixed with it, but it's definitely not as bad as if we hadn't removed that shadow underneath first, so I'm just going to live with it. Now, because I'm not going to go on top with any pigment or anything like that, I am now going to set that crease into place, which I wouldn't normally do if I was doing anything else on top of it. I'm just going to take the white shade again from the Urban Bible palette, which is the shade Veil, and I'm just going to pat that white on top to set it into place. Okay, so moving away from cutting the crease and onto winged liner. Now, something which is more of a recent thing for me is using gel liners over liquid liners. I do still like to use liquid liners for detail work and just generally for a little bit more precision, but I do find that gel is easier to work with when it comes to doing a wing. This one is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Jet Gel Liner. It is drying up ever so slightly, but we are just going to work with what we can today. So I'm just scooping out a little bit of that product and warming it up on the back of my hand with an angled liner brush, which happens to be an Anastasia number 14 angled liner brush. The reason I like to warm it up first is because I find it thins it out slightly, so it's easier to work with. If you went straight onto the eye with it, it is going to drag and it's going to feel a little bit drier, but if you warm it up first, then you find it's got a bit more moisture to it. I always start at the center of my eye and just sort of gauge the thickness that I want it to be, and then work through the inner corner right the way to the wing. Now with the wing, you want to follow on from your bottom lash line the shape of it. So just imagine if the line was extended, that's the line that your wing liner is going to go. Starting from the bottom of the eye and just winging it out to the edge. Now with that, I like to go from the middle part of the eye and then just work my way out towards the point of the wing. And there is your wing. If you do have more hooded eyes and you're scared it's going to transfer, you can also set it into place with some black shadow, but I personally don't feel that's necessary right now, so I'm going to leave it as that before I ruin it. So I feel like I've bored you guys enough with my voice at this point, so I'm going to go ahead and add my lashes and my skin makeup off camera and then come back to finish with you at the end. So just before I finish up this look and this video, another topic that people always ask me on is doing shadow on the lower lash line as well, so I thought I'd just touch on that whilst I'm here.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
So in the case of today's look, because we have got a dark winged liner going on, I am also going to do a dark under eyes as well. So I am going to start with the Sleek Intense Waterliner Zodiac Black Pencil. This one is a little bit blunt. I actually need to sharpen it, but it does the job really nicely. It's really black and intense. So I'm just going to go on my waterline with that. So when going under the waterline, it is again a case of the smaller the brush the better. So I am taking the Morphe M508 brush, which is actually so cute. It's so tiny and it's a little flat packing brush to put under the lower lash line. So I'm starting using the same unruly shade that I began with through the crease and just taking that on this little brush and going to really take it really close to the lower lash line. Now with the next shade, which was the orange, I'm actually going to take the same brush which I did on my upper crease because it is small enough to work under the eye. But I'm actually taking the orange from the Juvia's Place Zulu palette instead of the Urban Bible palette because I think this one is slightly brighter and I just prefer the shade of orange. So that's what I'm using. Now with the final shade, which is the yellow, I'm going to go ahead and take a small fluffy brush from Unicorn Cosmetics because this is the last shade. You want to make sure you're buffing it out nicely. So again, I'm taking the Juvia's Place Zulu palette and taking the yellow in there and literally just buffing that underneath the orange. Finally, popping on some lower lash mascara and we are done. And this, you guys, is our finished look using all of my new tips and tricks for makeup. Obviously, it goes without saying these tips and tricks may not work for absolutely everyone, as everyone's eye shapes are completely different. What works for me may not work for you, but do you know what? You never know unless you try. So if I've at least helped one person out of this video, then it makes it all the worthwhile. As well, I'm not trying to say there is any right or wrong to doing makeup. I'm not saying this is the exact way you should do it. This is just how I personally do my makeup, as a lot of people always ask me for my tips and tricks on doing these certain steps. So please don't take it offensively if you do not do your makeup the same way as me. That is completely fine. It is a personal preference thing. But like I said, this is how I do it. And if it helps anyone, then that's great. If you did enjoy this video or learn anything from it in any way, shape or form, then please do make sure to leave a thumbs up, a comment below of what you learned from the video, and also subscribe to my channel if you do want to see more content from me. Thank you so much again for watching. As always, guys, your support never goes unnoticed, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!